All right, in this video, I'm going to show you how to work so fast that literally everyone else you work with is going to be insanely impressed and shocked as to how much work you get done. So without further ado, let's get straight into it. Okay, so I've been told that I work reasonably fast. And, this is just because I worked in a startup and I just had no choice when I started off. But then when I went to work in industry, I just found the time frames just like very different. And so I think things are changing now, especially with AI and some of the industry changes. Expectations are becoming a lot higher, and it does pay to be, 10x more productive or, getting things done more effectively. So this isn't about how to type faster or anything like that. It is purely tips on how to have your workflow a little bit more efficient so you can get more stuff done. So let's get into it. The first one is to spend more time planning. So most people don't actually spend a lot of time planning, but if you think about it from a computer science perspective, and yes, I'm going to bring it back to computer science, there's this principle called explore versus exploit. So there is a computer science problem called the multi-arm bandit problem. And basically, in that problem, what they state is that, okay, if you have a set of slot machines that have different payout rates, and you're trying to figure out which slot machine will give you the most amount of money, and you're trying to optimize the amount of money you get over a period of time, what is the strategy? Because you don't actually know what the payout rates are. And so what that dictates is that you should spend a period of time exploring and basically pulling levers of different slot machines and seeing how they work. You play around and you get different payout rates. And then you discover, okay, this machine has a much higher payout rate. But you wouldn't know that until you explore all the different options. And so mathematically, what it comes down to is you spend about 37% of your time or 37% of your options available to you in your exploration phase, and then you go into exploitation. So in practice, obviously, don't just take computer science and apply it to real life. Like, you could apply it to dating. If you want to get married in 10 years, and maybe you spend 3.7 years exploring your options and then, get married. But obviously in practice, none of those things really play out. But I think we can take these principles into work. So from a work perspective, instead of just jumping in and starting it all over, maybe just extend the amount of time you spend planning what you're actually going to do. And I think for the most part, and yes, there are times when, it pays to just get some wins on the board and just start moving, but spending a little bit more time planning the project that you're working on can actually make you a lot faster, right? The second one kind of ties into the first one, is to figure out the critical pathway. So really figure out what you actually need to do to achieve what you're trying to do, right? So for example, if your boss tells you to do something and you're like, okay, cool, like what's the scope? Like what is actually included in the things that you want me to do versus things you just like nice add-ons, but we just don't know because we haven't communicated about properly. So what you're trying to do is figure out what the critical pathway is. What are the exact tasks that actually need to be done to achieve this goal or outcome, right? And what are the things that are out of scope or like maybe, could nice to have sort of thing if you have time. And if you can set expectations and sort of communicate about that, that's super helpful. So spend more time planning, figure out the critical pathway to actually getting tasks done. And then number 3, which I think is like one of the most important things, is rushing to 80%. And so I basically sprint all the way to getting the first 80% done because I don't want to waste time on things that might not work or like, might not be super important. So I'm rushing to get that 80% done. What that might look like from a wireframe perspective, instead of like going and drawing everything very nicely, just rush to get the actual wireframe done that somewhat sort of meets the expectations, and then you can optimize from there, right? And this links into my final step, which is get feedback early. So if you rush to 80%, get that feedback loop really quickly, you haven't wasted time on things that don't really matter, and then you can come back and keep iterating. And then the last 20%, you can really meticulously make sure everything's good and like working properly, all that kind of stuff, right? So those are the 4 things I would do to work a little bit faster, especially if you're early in your career. These 4 things will really make you stand out because most of the people don't really get aligned on what needs to be done. They waste a lot of time on things that aren't super important because they never had that conversation. They don't figure out what the critical pathway is. They don't plan enough, and then they also don't rush to the 80%. They just take their time with the whole thing, or maybe they build it up slowly, right? So everything's done to perfection, but every week it's only 10% done or 20% done. versus 80% done, not super great, but gets the job done by the end of the week. Then you can iterate from there, right? And at least people can see the progress as well. So those are my 4 tips to help you out. Hopefully those help out, and good luck. Start working faster and let me know how you go in the comments. Catch you later.